Welcome back to the best of Rslash. Today, we're taking a look at Rslash Let's Not Meet, where OP sees a ghost and later realizes it was no ghost. Okay, so this happened when I was around 9 years old. I'm 25 now, and it's something I will never forget. It gives me goosebumps to this day. I lived in a terraced house, 4 houses combined, and my neighbors and I each have our own little patio. There's a small road about 10 meters from my yard where people do their Sunday walks and so on. Only a small fence separates my yard and patio from the road. I live in a pretty crowded area with several of these terraced houses spread around in my neighborhood. So seeing people walking on the road is pretty normal for me. Seeing random people standing on my patio is not. When I was 9, I usually got home from school about an hour before my mom got home from work. I live maybe 50 meters away from school, so my mom figured I was mature enough to be home alone for around an hour before she got home. This one day, I got home from school. I did the usual thing, which was to make sure I locked the front door and double-checked that the back door leading to the patio was locked. I was 9. Being alone was a little scary even though it was in the middle of the day and only for 1 hour. I then rushed to my room upstairs to play as much PlayStation as possible before my mom came home and made me do homework. While playing, I heard this noise coming from outside my window. My room was located 1 floor over the patio, with a view to the road I told you about before. It was kind of like the sound of a cat, but my cat had been missing for over 3 months. Hope sparked and I thought, oh my gosh, did he finally come back? I ran downstairs to check if it was my cat, but the sight that met me gives me goosebumps just writing this. There was a guy standing on my patio, a tall guy with black hair covering half of his eyes, making him look like a male version of the Ring woman or something. I could hear him making high-pitched sounds, almost like a cat meowing, a brown liquid that was running down from his mouth, and I could see him spitting out my dad's stomped cigarettes. He was actually eating from the ashtray. I was frozen observing this. Eventually, I snapped out of it and screamed so loud that the man must have heard it. He didn't react. He kept on eating from the ashtray. I ran upstairs to my room, locked the door, and called my mom, who then called the cops. I've never been more terrified in my life. Laying in bed under my sheets, shivering with fear as I hear these creepy high-pitched noises from the guy eating cigarette stomps from the ashtray on my patio. I kind of blacked out for a moment, because the next thing I remember is the police arriving on the road by my backyard. I hear them talking to the guy, saying stuff like, "What are you doing? Get over here or we will come down and arrest you," and so on. He didn't respond, but the high-pitched sounds was more frequent and louder. I decided to look through the window, feeling safe now that the cops were there. I could see 2 police officers standing by my fence, 1 man and a woman. I did not see the creepy man, however, because he was standing directly 1 story under me and my field of view. The police jumped the fence, and I remember hearing the creepy guy screaming louder than anything I've ever heard before. He charged the female police officer with full force, and he knocked her out cold. The male officer then immediately tased the guy, leaving him shaking on the ground, screaming still. The policeman struggled to keep him on the ground while putting handcuffs on him, but eventually made it. After a while, he managed to wake up the female police officer, who seemed to be badly hurt. He called for backup and an ambulance. And then he sees me standing in the window above him. The expression on my face must have been something else, because he just looked at me and said, "I sure as hell hope you didn't see all that." I started to cry. By this time, neighbors started to arrive, wondering what the hell was going on. One of my neighbors, an elderly woman, made me come down and she took care of me until my mom came back home. The police took the creepy guy with them in the car and left. Before they left, they promised to come back and talk to us about what had happened. This is where the story takes an unexpected turn. The male police officer came back later that night and sat down with me and my mom to talk. He explained that the guy on my patio was actually diagnosed with severe autism. He had escaped a facility where mentally challenged people lived, located around 5 kilometers where I live. He explained that the guy had actually been living in my house 5 years ago, and he had been forced to move when his mom, his only caretaker, died. The poor guy probably thought he would find his mom in my house. He missed the routines and he missed living there with his mom. The police had to move him from the house that time 5 years ago because he was extremely strong. From what I had heard, he had extreme tensions in the body because of the autism, making his muscles grow stronger and stronger throughout the years. This was the reason he reacted the way he did when the police came this day. Still frightened, I told the police officer that he needed to make sure this would never happen again. He promised it wouldn't. After a few sleepless nights, my life got back to normal. The years went by and the guy didn't come back. Not until 1 year ago. At this time, my mom and dad had moved out. I bought the house from them, and I'm still living there today. I was enjoying my morning coffee on the patio when I see this random guy stopping on the road by my fence. He just stands there, looking at me. I look at him and give him a nod. And then I hear the high-pitched noises. Holy shit, it's him! His hair had turned gray, but the high-pitched sounds made me realize. My heart started racing and I instantly remembered the reason that he was back. I realized that he must have managed to escape again. Because I kept my cool a bit longer than I was when I was 9, I started to realize how I felt sorry for the guy. 16 years later, and he was back to look for his mom. I decided to carefully ask him if he wanted to come down to the patio. He instantly jumped the fence. I started to think he would knock me out like he did the other police officer. He didn't. He smiled. He looked at me and smiled. I offered him to sit down. He didn't respond. I offered him to come inside. He started laughing. We went inside. His face lit up. Pure joy. He was home. It reminded him of the life he had with his mom. It almost made me tear up. All of a sudden, he sat down on my couch, turned on my TV, and switched directly to the cartoons. I observed him for a while. He was just completely focused on the cartoons. I just wanted him to enjoy the moment, so I didn't say anything to him. I realized I had to call the facility to let them know. The caretakers arrived 10 minutes later. After a lot of convincing, he got back up, crying, and they went back to the facility. I called the facility 2 days later. We made a deal. His name is Tom, and I now consider Tom my friend. Every Sunday from the day he returned, Tom and his caretakers visit me to watch cartoons. They say it's the highlight of his week. It makes my heart warm. Now, for several years, my thoughts were, let's not meet, guy on the patio eating from the ashtray. Now my thoughts are, let's meet every Sunday to watch cartoons, my friend Tom. Oh, that's such a good story. This next story has been posted by Florianizer. I was about 7 years old. My brother, about 10. It was well past our bedtime when our mom woke up off the couch to put us to bed. Our dad worked construction and out of town back then, so it was often just us 3 at the house for weeks at a time. Up the stairs to the immediate right was our parents' bedroom. Going left put you in the middle of the hallway. Taking another left down the hallway led to my brother's room. The opposite end was my room, which was also across the hall from our upstairs bathroom. At either end of the hallway are windowed doors. We always kept locked and rarely used. The door on my end led to a balcony overlooking our front yard, and the door on my brother's end opened to the back porch. The house kind of leans into a small hill. My brother and mom both had a habit of waking up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I always knew this because I was always a light sleeper and they just couldn't help flushing with the door wide open. This night, however, my brother stopped on his way to his room and came back towards the bathroom. I'm gonna pee before I go to bed. The past few nights I've been too afraid to walk into the bathroom. I keep seeing a man wearing stripes at the end of the hallway. I don't know if my mom wrote it off as my brother telling ghost stories to try to scare me, or if she was already half asleep and didn't catch it. But she didn't react at all to my brother's confession. I, on the other hand, was terrified by it. The fear of seeing a ghost like that at the end of the hallway or through the windows is the reason I started running from the stairs to my bed at night. Years later, when I was about 18, my mom and I were having a conversation in her car about a dog we had a very short time when I was little. We were sharing stories about Max's tendencies towards destroying my shoes and other unruly behaviors when my mom blurted out, "Do you remember that time I opened the front door for the cops and Max ran inside the kitchen and started tearing open the big bag of dog food we had?" This really caught me by surprise, because in all the years I lived in that house, we never once called the cops. We are a gun owner family in a quiet, rural West Virginia neighborhood, etc. I asked her what she was talking about, and she looked equally surprised as if she had just revealed something by accident. "Oh, that's right. I never told you because you were too young at that time. One night, I woke up hearing noises outside my window. When I looked, I saw a man staring into my bedroom." She went on to describe how turning on the lights caused him to take off running and how she grabbed my dad's pistol before calling the cops. I can't remember all the details I gave them when they showed up. Tall, white male, wearing a striped shirt and jeans, short, dark hair, something like that. They said it matched the description of a man they were looking for in the area. It turns out he had escaped from jail on a murder charge. Now I know it sounds so obvious hearing those two stories back to back, but it wasn't until a few years ago in my mid-20s that I pieced together that my brother had unknowingly warned us about a murderer who spent multiple nights casing our home. This next story has been posted by Bog Nymph. When I was around 5, sometime during the holidays, a man yanked me by the collar at the back of my shirt to choke me, and then shoved me, all while out of the sight of my parents at a very large and packed indoor playground in the mall. There was a little girl who had very expensive dolls I really coveted. She was proper obnoxious, and the only reason I even played with her is because I got to hold the baby doll. Well, she was fine with that because she wanted to go around yanking on big boys' shirts like she said she would to her big brother, who evidently wasn't at the mall that day. I sat on the baby jungle gym and rocked the doll until I realized I couldn't see my parents in the crowd, in the bleachers anymore. I hopped off to look around for them and spotted my companion right away. It was the moment I approached her to return her doll that one of the big boy's fathers yanked me by the collar, slapped me hard in the back to push me forward after releasing me. This was one of the first times I felt the wind knocked out of me. He snarled under his breath at us, asking how we bitches like to be choked. I was physically stunned and actually dropped the doll on the ground. If he was watching so hard, then why did he attack me and not the girl who was trying to swing on kids? I felt targeted because I did not play her game. I was rocking and feeding the doll. The look of rage in his face I will never be able to forget. He gave us a look of unspeakable disgust and then looked up at the preoccupied crowd on the bleachers and angrily power walked away. It was gross, but even worse for me. I had never been called a B word before. I didn't tell my parents about the curse word because I felt I'd get in trouble. I ran and told my parents between sobs after the rounding of the corner between the baby and the older kids' jungle gyms. Security searched them all, but he had obviously been long gone. I remember my parents acting like it was no big deal because they had 2 infants to watch while I played. Years later, when I asked my mom about it, she went white and said that was one of the scariest moments for her right after when I almost choked on a grape skin. She said it was then that even with 3 sets of eyes supposedly on me and dozens of other parents, patrons, and security present, she realized just how easily I could have been scooped up and gone forever at the playground in the mall. You've been listening to the best of Rslash. If you like this content, please make sure to leave a thumbs up as it helps our channel grow. Also, if you didn't know before, we have not only a YouTube channel, but a podcast where we release content like this every day, 7 days a week. So if you want to hear more, feel free to subscribe.